Heads up, fellow female leaders, executives, and founders. We have just opened enrollment for the Fall Renegade Accelerator. You can head to renegadeaccelerator.com to check out all the information and apply.
I think that for me, like my goal was and is, to create a more ethical, empowering, inclusive supply chain and product that I think really is values aligned with like the change that I want to see in the world.
I'm Amy Jo Martin. Welcome to the Why Not Now show. You know that thing you've been thinking about doing? Yeah, that one. Why not now? Have you ever actually taken the time to ask yourself, what's stopping me? Let's talk it through. This is your chance to give that idea the attention it deserves and take action. Each episode, I have a chat with a fascinating person, from entrepreneurs to athletes, celebrities, my parents, rocket scientists, and all walks of life. We talk through a critical time when they've asked themselves, why not now? We dissect that day or even that moment, step by step. Okay, everyone. So I was at a dinner during South by Southwest here in Austin, and I had this dinner with other female founders, and this woman, Nadya Okamoto, was at the table. Got to talking about her, started learning more about her story. First of all, she's cracking us up because she is an incredible founder. I will tell you all about her, but she also happens to have 3 million people following her on TikTok, plus all the other, platforms, Instagram stacked and all the other things. By the time this airs in a couple days, I swear it'll even be bigger. So I'm not going to throw out the numbers. Let's just say she's quite the force. But she didn't start out as an influencer. She started out as a founder. So she started her first nonprofit at age 16. It's been around for 8 years. So you can do the math there. She's had multiple companies. She is the founder and CEO of August. And that company is growing. You'll hear all about it when we hop in and chat. And she has grown this from a place of really understanding and processing who she is, her journey, her story, and her childhood. And so she has found a solution to a problem that she experienced growing up and that she sees as a challenge, not only for women, but for the world and for the earth. So you will hear more about the mission that she's on. But what I'd really like for you to pay attention to is her fierce focus and her self-awareness and craving to learn. So this woman, she's 24. She's accomplished a lot already in her life, and she is unapologetic to those who may or may not think that she can do what she's doing, because she's just doing it. And she's also extremely humble and aware that she's constantly learning. So there's a blend there that's pretty darn powerful. I am amazed. I have told Nadya I will do whatever it takes to help you in terms of opening doors and doing things to just support, because I'm such a fan of her fierce determination and focus and just smart approach with a ton of work ethic too. Now let's talk about the work ethic real quick. One thing that Nadya acknowledges is that at one point she had a dangerously intense work ethic. Again, she's 24 right now currently. So she's already been through this cycle of understanding and experiencing, wow, that doesn't work for me. She's had this experience. She's already integrated it and applying it to her life moving forward. Like, what wisdom. If you want to see a new approach, a fresh and an innovative approach to how a company, a brand, an organization can be amplified on social media, social communication, as I like to call it, you should follow Nadya Okamoto and August, the company, on TikTok, on Instagram, on all the channels, and see how they're doing this. So after meeting Nadya at dinner, I remember feeling as I was driving home this sense of, wow, this younger generation, I feel pretty darn good about where they're headed. And I think they've got some things figured out for us. Let's get out of the way and let them get after it and continue to get after it. There's a lot of refreshing point of view and concepts that I see from Nadya, and it makes me excited. Without further ado, here's Nadya. Heads up to my fellow female leaders, executives, and founders. We've just opened enrollment for the fall Renegade Accelerator. Now, this is the career love of my life, and we have been around this block a few times. This is version 9, and it all started as an experiment. Now we have hundreds of women across the globe within the Renegade community. You can head to renegadeaccelerator.com for all the information. You can learn about the program. You can hear from the Renegade graduates. You can hear their results, watch their videos, check out the curriculum, the testimonials, and everything in between. Years ago, I went to Mark Cuban for some investment advice, and I thought I was going to hear him say something about real estate investing or maybe something specific about the stock market. That was not the case. What he said to me was, Amy Jo, invest in yourself. And from that point on, I really did double down on myself. And it's amazing to see the ROI. The Renegade Accelerator is definitely the career love of my life. It's an intensive, real-time virtual training program that continues on. This is not a stop and start. We provide the foundation for the Renegade mentality that extends into everything you do personally and professionally, whether that's growing and scaling your business, climbing the corporate ladder, getting on boards, generating more wealth through investing. If you're fundraising, we also focus on that, as well as, maybe most importantly, building your personal brand so it opens the doors that you need to get you exactly where you want to go. Now, if you want something you've never had, you must do something you've never done and go somewhere you've never gone, right? And usually that means surrounding yourself with people you've never surrounded yourself with before. So that is exactly what this is about. And when I've practiced that in my own career and in my own life, the growth has been exponential. Talk about 10x the way you think and execute in that scenario. It's real. Now, in this program with the Renegade Accelerator, we focus on building your personal brand online and offline. I've been doing this for well over 15 years, and I've done it with some of the biggest names out there, some of the biggest brands out there, from Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, helping him build his strategy, boots on the ground from the very beginning and beyond, to Hilton Worldwide, to executives, to athletes, celebrities, founders, you name it. And that's what we're going to do with you. In the Renegade Accelerator, I provide the step-by-step playbook for you to grow your thought leadership, your voice of authority, your influence, both online and offline. We also focus on public speaking. Now, this is a big area in the curriculum because getting on those stages and growing that thought leadership, becoming more and more of that voice of authority, is super important to be able to get you to where you want to go. And you know what we do? We help you get paid to do so. Now, there's a business side to public speaking. I've been public speaking for about 15 years professionally, which means getting paid to do it. There's a definite playbook and business operations around this. We teach you that. We also teach you the performance side, which is extremely important as well. The curriculum is equal parts education, collaboration, and accountability. Now, we are industry agnostic for a reason, meaning we have women from all different verticals and different industries, because that value exchange and that ability to share the intellectual capital ends up being exponential. So that accountability is also key. Renegades are all about taking action, massive intentional action. And of the over 200 graduates that we have in this Renegade Collective, they have all said, you know what, I signed up and joined the Renegade Accelerator for the curriculum, for the education, and for the content, but they stayed for the people. They stayed for the results and the network and the people. So once you graduate from the Renegade Accelerator, you automatically become a member of the Renegade Collective. This is where you will have access to everything from peer circles, from the other graduates who have graduated before you, to experts, in-person live events, this network of women who opens doors and who are committed to your goals and your growth just as much as their own. Renegade Collective members are personally investing in one another. We are making introductions. We are hiring one another. We're sharing that expertise and that approach that really has created exponential growth for the community. We have had many Renegade Accelerator grads on this podcast, so please listen back to those episodes and hear from them as well. If this piques your interest, head to renegadeaccelerator.com, take a look at everything, apply, and we will circle back with you. If it's a good fit right now, we have limited seats and we can't wait for you to join this Renegade community. We already have an incredible roster who has joined for this next cohort, and we'd love to add you to the list. So head to renegadeaccelerator.com and get that application in. Nadya, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me. And in the spirit of why not now, let's hop in. Can you tell me about a time when you had a big decision to make and you had to ask yourself, why not now?
I think that I've had that moment probably on a daily basis for the last several years. I think that, so I have borderline personality disorder, and it's something I was diagnosed with a couple years ago. And like, self-doubt is, and like self-hatred is like such an integral part and defining part of this diagnosis. And so I always say like imposter syndrome is something that I experienced to like a very extreme degree. And I think that the question of why not now is something that I ask myself a lot, like why not now? Why not me? Because asking myself questions like that and really reflecting on them is how I think I kind of give myself the confidence boost and, you know, how I get my passion for the issue that I'm working on to really overcome any sort of self-doubt that I feel.
Oh my gosh. So thank you for sharing. And it's interesting because a lot of people would look at you from the outside, of course, and see these metrics and this platform that you've built and the confidence that you exude in this in the content. I mean, you are definitely a force and presence on TikTok, on Instagram, online, and not only for August, your company, but in general for what you believe. And so it's interesting because seeing is believing, and I think sometimes seeing is believing, but also listening to the understory and the undercurrents. And so a lot of people that may not know you that well are probably really surprised to hear that you struggle with so much self-doubt and even potentially self-hatred. Would you say that you kind of, when you're sharing content and when you're able to self-express through, let's say, social content, that's a different kind of version, a different way for you to play? Or how does, because you think the two don't add up, but they do.
Well, I actually think that in some ways, a lot of my insecurities, they keep me really humble to the point of which, like, I don't expect perfection from myself. Like, I talked to a lot of my influencer friends about this, and I've never had the pressure to feel perfect or look perfect because I don't think I've ever thought of myself as someone who's like a beauty influencer. You know, like I've never even held myself to that standard. And so I think because of that, like, a lot of my healing work has been just getting really comfortable with where I'm at in the current moment. And I think also, like, no mean comment anybody will ever say to me online, whether it be about my body or my looks or my accomplishments, is worse than probably what I've said to myself. And so I think that in that way, it's not I approach it from a different lens of this is just kind of like an unfiltered thing I get to play with. I don't really look through comments. And when I do see mean comments, like sometimes it gets to my head, but then most of the times I'm just like, oh, poo you, you know? So I think that a lot of it is like, I just have a lot of fun with it. And I think that a lot of what I share too, whether it be like stressed about the current moment that we're living in or about my period or about trauma, like comes from a place of having a deep desire for this larger sense of community. Like so much of my depression or my mental health or even my journey of like being a tired and burnt out girl boss at one point in my life, like so much of that journey left me feeling really alone. And social media has been one of the most tangible tools that I've been able to find community around those experiences. And so I think that in many ways, social media can be a very isolating and unhealthy thing. And, you know, it's been a huge cause of a lot of distress in my life, you know, over the last decade of being on it. But at the same time, it's been one of the most positive parts of my life because it's connected me to people that are some of my closest friends, are, you know, our community members with August, and are even some of my team members now.
Okay, so gosh, I'm loving all of this. And I think what's so cool is the wisdom that you have. And you've been on this journey for a while. We were just talking before we hit record, and I love what you said about, you know, people think that I just turn into this influencer overnight and I've got this company and so on and so forth. And you're like, I've been at this for many, many years.
Yeah.
Can you give us the movie trailer? So let's say the 2 to 5 minute, where did this start? You can go back as far as you want. So I've had the luxury of sitting and enjoying dinner with you and just absolutely loved your energy and vibe and what you're about. And so as much as you want to share, catch us up for those who maybe aren't familiar with your journey.
Well, yeah, I mean, just as you said, like, I think that people see me now, you know, I have like 3.3 million followers on TikTok. And I think because of that and like having a brand, there's this kind of assumption that, oh, a lot of influencers can just like start these brands. And so I get asked a lot, like, when did I decide that I wanted to start a brand as an influencer? And it's just like the most incorrect question to ask me because like TikTok was after I had started the brand, right? It was 2 years into forming this company. And, you know, I'm 8 years into my career. I'm 24 now, but I started my career in this period space when I was 16. I started a nonprofit called Period that is still going and growing under new leadership. And I led that nonprofit for 6 years. And during that time, I was really focused on distributing period care to people in need, doing a lot of youth leadership development, you know, as with a large chapter network. And, you know, in my time as executive director, we had distributed like 25 million units of period products, had registered, you know, over 1,000 campus chapters, had presences in all 50 states and 50 countries. And then I published a book called Period Power, and I was on book tour with this book about periods. And then I was working on another company in Gen Z marketing where a lot of period care brands are my clients. And it was really the learning that I took from all of that, working in media awareness, legislative advocacy, nonprofit, and writing and being an author in the period space. And I think 6 years of learning from all those different ways I was focused on this mission is really what led me to starting August. And so I started August in early 2020, and we built behind the scenes with our community for over a year. And then launched in June. And June is when I really started putting time into TikTok. So for me, TikTok, it is the follow-on result of being a CEO of a brand and being like, I feel like I should take advantage of this channel from a marketing standpoint. And then I just kind of fell in love with the platform as like, here, this is the social platform where I can be completely unfiltered and talk about constipation and mental health and periods in a way that like really serves my ADHD attention span, you know, of like 10 to 15-second videos. I think for me, I'm so impatient, like even I'm working on my patience as a CEO, but like, I think that I'm all about trying things out, trying as many things out as possible, being okay with what fails and just seeing like what works and what doesn't work. I'm not meant to be able to do that when you have to wait like 3 months to figure out if something works. And TikTok will let you know if something works within the hour. And I think that that really resonated with me as a platform and as a CEO.
Amazing. I want to double down on something that you said earlier too about not expecting perfection, and that helps keep you humble. I love that calculus because that actually it can really, naturally encourage and allow you to crave imperfection if you want to remain humble, but also that willingness to have the growth mindset and experiment constantly. You can't have perfection to be able to have the feedback loop turning that fast. Okay, so your journey, so your story, movie trailer, where does it start? Where's the opening scene? What do you see?
I was born in New York City and definitely had like a chaotic childhood. I mean, I think something I think about a lot is like a core theme throughout my life was being a sister. I'm the oldest of three girls and I'm a single mom. I think that my upbringing in living through a lot of chaos and domestic violence and abuse with like some strong women around me is very much, I think, of course, that feeds into who I am and my identity and even how I approach work and what I'm passionate about. And for me, my passion for periods, I think really stems from that constantly questioning what my worth is and my relationship to my body and reclaiming my body. And yeah, I started Period, the nonprofit, because I just got really passionate about period poverty as an issue that I had never really thought of before until I started talking directly to homeless women and hearing their stories of using things like toilet paper and socks and brown paper grocery bags and cardboard to take care of their periods. And it was really just something that I had never thought of before.
Amazing. And the age in which you even began, I mean, there's got to be a lot of drive and a lot of bravery in your DNA because this is, I mean, not only you've done work with McKinsey, right? And you obviously are leading this company now, but you've gone through fundraising and you've also, in the meantime, when you had your nonprofit, you also obviously graduated and were navigating college and this adulthood. So what's your X factor? What do you think is the unique selling proposition of you?
One, I think that I've always had like a dangerously intense work ethic. And like what I mean by that is like when I say I was a workaholic or that I struggle with workaholism, I feel like that word is vastly overused now. Like entrepreneurs are like, work hard until you die, work hard until you drop. And like I mean that from like a dangerous point of view where like I have chronic constipation because I literally have trained myself not to feel like I need to go to the bathroom so I can keep sending emails. And there were years that went by when I only slept 2 hours a night for like a year. I've like lost so many friendships and relationships because I thought that all I needed to do was work and work and work. I think a lot of my drive was definitely like a mode of survival. Like I do have PTSD and I think for a long time, like work was my escape. And it was always like, because I felt worthless, as at a baseline, a lot of the worth that I derived from a self-worth perspective was through my work. And so I was just addicted to it. I needed to go, 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 go. I was always moving. And that ended me up in rehab when I was in 2020, like when I was kind of in this career transition. And a lot of it was because I found myself being like, well, who the fuck am I outside of work? Like, when I stop working, like, why do I feel like nothing? And so I feel like how I would answer that question maybe a couple of years ago would have been like, oh, well, it's my work ethic. Like I think I work harder than anybody else. And when all my friends are out partying or anything, like I'm working. And I was always kind of like that. Now I feel like I sleep more. So like other people might be out partying and I'm probably sleeping. I think that for me, like rest in many ways has become my superpower. But honestly, I think that a lot of it is like ever since I was a kid, I've always loved talking about things that nobody else wanted to talk about. Like I was always super interested in asking my mom about sex. And I was always really, really interested in like childbirth and interested in like, what are the secrets that nobody's saying? And so naturally I end up in a career where I get to talk about periods and, discharge and, this like being a survivor, like all these things that I think are so stigmatized. And I think part of it, one could say like, oh, it's kind of about this, like being in this inner circle, right? Like the things that you relate so deeply to people, like I get to connect with people about things that they find so vulnerable, but that we all have so much in common. And so I think that that's where a lot of my interest, like growing up comes from, like, from being kicked out of classes because I kept teaching my classmates how babies are made to, now doing that on TikTok.
Oh my God. Now now just be like, I've got a bigger stage now.
Yeah.
This started in the classroom like years ago.
Exactly.
Thank you for sharing your story and the genesis, because it just goes to show like this is something that's been brewing, and this has been something that's your experiences in life have informed where you are obviously now. Over the course of decades. And it's funny how you're like, when I was going through my career change when I was 20, I remember when we first met, and I left our dinner thinking, wow, we're in good hands. This generation's got some things figured out that we don't. And I can't help but think about putting myself in your shoes, Nadya, and wondering, like, what do you think about, I'm 43. And we don't want to oversimplify or generalize, but like there's just a lot of backwards things that we've learned in this generation too. Every single one has. But what are some of the biggest things where you just look at, people, maybe you're walking into a fundraising pitch or you're talking to different people and they're 10 years older or 20 years older or 30 years older. And you just seem to have so much clarity and self-awareness that I have a hard time even thinking about how you might see some of the older generations who don't have that yet, Like, are there things where you're like tilt head on a constant basis? I wonder why those 40-year-olds do this.
Well, I think that probably one of the biggest things is this idea of like, quote unquote, experience, like what makes you qualified to raise money or to start a company. And, I'm on my third company right now, and I still get asked all the time, like, what makes you feel like you have time for this? Or you haven't, like, am I mature enough to have employees? That's a question that I've probably been faced with from a very, very early age. And, when I was raising money, at 16, which is when I started the first nonprofit, and, it started just having like a budget of maybe a couple $100s a year, all the way up to within a few years having like, a multi-million-dollar budget. So I think that for me, like I've kind of been on this crazy ride of like, even dealing with money. I think money is one of the biggest things. Like a lot of, I think Gen X is easy to say, oh, we believe in the next generation, but they're not actually going to write you a check. Right. And like, there's a lot of concern over like trust of like how I use my time, what I want to experience in the world. Even when we were raising our pre-seed round, like I definitely got questions of like, why should they invest in me if I'm also still in school? Like we raised our pre-seed round when we were both senior in college. And it's like, what if we want to do a career change in 5 years, right? Like maybe we don't really know what we want to do with our lives. And I think that's always really been fascinating. I mean, even with like my mom today, like we have a lot of conversations because she always brings up like if I'm going to go to grad school, and I don't know how many times I have to tell her like, no, I'm never going to grad school. I have no interest in doing any more school. But I think that there is a lot of like people of an older generation who grew up with the expectations of, you go to high school, you go to college, you go to business school, you get some work experience, and then you start a company. And for me, like I kind of did that all in reverse. Like I started a company and then I graduated from college, and now I'm just going to continue doing the thing that I'm doing. So I think that's been a really big part. That's been something that I definitely, there's like a lot of conversations that go back and forth in that, I get a lot of questions about like pressure to choose only one thing to do with my career. I think that a huge point of like the Gen Z workforce is like everyone identifying as some sort of multi-hyphenate person that has many different careers and side hobbies, side hustles that become other careers, right? Like that's in many ways why the hobby economy is such a thing, of people being able to go onto TaskRabbit or becoming an Uber driver while they're also like pursuing their passions and things like that. But I think for me, like even when I was raising capital or like when I was with the nonprofit, like whether it be from the board or from my investors, there's always this question of like, well, we need your full attention. Like, why would you run multiple companies or do multiple things? Now I feel like I always have 3 to 5 different parts of my career going. And some investors definitely would disagree that that is like something to handle, or that would be a sustainable way for my energy and my career. But like, I don't see being anything different. Like, right now I run this company and I have 2 podcasts, I just finished the manuscript of my book and I'm an influencer. Influencers and being like doing modeling is like my main source of income. And so I feel like there's all these other parts of my career. And like whenever I have calls with like investors all the time who are like, we just want to make sure that like this is your only focus. Like this is your main focus. At what point can you say goodbye to those other things? And I think that that's one of like the biggest philosophical like questions I turn back to them, because I'm like, look, I know I can have multiple careers, because guess what? If you have kids, how much time do you spend with your kids? Like, I don't have any kids. I get to spend all that time doing something else, and like all the time that they might spend, raising their kids, which, could be several hours a day, I'm able to work on this thing that I'm super passionate about that feels just like a hobby or something I would do with friends, like a podcast. And it happens to be something that is also work.
I love this. Okay, so this is interesting. I think we had a board meeting earlier that for a company that I'm on, and we were talking about this talent, this developer, and how we didn't care, but we wondered how many other jobs they have, and we wouldn't ask because they're performing, but it's clear that they probably have 5 other things that they're like major things. But that wouldn't have necessarily flown X amount of years ago, because it was so important. Like, you must say that you're dedicated. And so how do you invest in yourself?
I sleep a lot.
I love that answer. I've never heard anyone, in 300 episodes, I've never heard anyone say that. And that's like the best answer.
Yeah. And, I think that for me, like, I definitely feel like a few years ago, I probably told myself that sleep was like a waste of time, or like needing rest was a weakness. But like, 2 days ago, I slept until 2 p.m. and it was amazing. And like, I think I'm still catching up on a lot of sleep that I missed in early years of my career. But for me, like even now, I'll probably sleep at like 8 to 10 hours a night. And that's a really big investment in myself. I would also say like do yoga like probably every day. Yoga is something that I got really into like when I was in mental health treatment, and just being able to make time for that, especially in New York City, when like that is a cost, like it is a true investment in myself.
Yeah.
It definitely feels like an investment. And so I do yoga, and then also therapy, like investing in therapy that again is like $200 a week, but is something that I definitely feel like I need to be able to do my job.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. If you are digging this podcast, please do us a favor and subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. It just takes a moment and it means a ton to us. What's one thing you find yourself learning over and over? This lesson just keeps coming back until you integrate it more.
Probably like to go to therapy. I think that like, honestly, like every few weeks, I'll look at the cost of therapy and I'm like, oh, this is so expensive. Like, do I really have to do this? And then like, I feel like I routinely will try to cut back on the amount of sessions that I'm doing. And then I'll kind of hit like a depressive low. And then I'm like, wow, I really just need to go to therapy. So I feel like that is actually a lesson that I learn kind of frequently. I've always struggled with like investing in myself. And I think I get the reminder from like the world and my body to do that. I would also say, I think another thing that I'm just like consistently wowed by is like how much period stigma still exists in the world. I obviously am surrounded by my team members who are also progressive thinkers who, very much believe that there's a period stigma. And yet every day I get death threats and just the meanest comments from people online who think that what I'm doing is unnecessary, is offensive. And I think that is something that surprises me a lot, is just like stepping out of my bubble and realizing like, wow, like even like, I'm very pro-abortion and I've been very outspoken about that. And I think that I kind of forget that we live in a world that isn't all pro-abortion and, pro taking period stigma away, and I think that that's something that I consistently have to realize, especially as someone living in a liberal bubble like New York City.
Let's talk about August. That's a great transition. Tell us more about August and what was the green light for that, like the why not now moment. So understanding growing up the period poverty was something that you recognized and were passionate about. And age 16, you've got this nonprofit. But then when did this transfer over into a company? And tell us more about it. And I know that you're growing, and I'd love to hear that. And then I have some questions on your leadership style too.
Well, yeah, as I mentioned, I ran this nonprofit. And I think for the few years before I decided to start August, I was splitting my time between running a nonprofit and also being chief brand officer at a Gen Z marketing agency called Juve Consulting. And when I was working at Juve, a lot of my main clients were in the period care space. So like Tampax, Always, some of the Procter and Gamble brands. And so these were companies that were clients of mine and who were looking to me as like basically an expert to talk to them about how this new generation thought of periods in a more inclusive and powerful way. And I think that for me, when I was on the consulting side, I was just in this like perpetual state of, I think okay way to put it would be like frustration. Like I was just constantly frustrated that I was trying to convey something that I cared so deeply about, right? Whether it be gender inclusivity or sustainability. And I just felt like I was not being heard. And I think that for me, it kind of came to a point where, I was running this nonprofit where all of my donors were these corporations that I was also trying to get to be more sustainable. And maybe it just was that it wasn't happening at the rate that I had hoped, or that there was just so much corporate red tape that it was hard to make significant changes around sustainability, around supply chain, around these different aspects of a period brand. And some of it was even like how they think about impact, right? Like making sure that we're having corporations be a vehicle for impact and social change, which I think like is a necessary fix in a world where so many issues have been caused by capitalism. But so I think that, is this microcosm of doing all these things where I was constantly talking about periods. I was learning about how, periods really are this thing that or the period brands are responsible for curating so much stigma and, negative messaging around periods throughout the last century. And finally got to a point like mid 2019 where I was like, really all the things that I'm frustrated by from the work that I'm doing as a recipient of all these products to donate them out, to being a consultant and wanting these brands to be more inclusive and empowering and sustainable, could be answered if I just could make the decisions about making a brand. And so I think that August is really the answer to a lot of frustration that I think I felt in all the other parts of my work for a long time. And to be honest, like I had no idea what I was doing. This is my first experience ever working in e-commerce. I didn't even really know what like VC stood for. I didn't understand what venture capital, like what it meant to be venture backed. So it was definitely like a really steep learning curve. And yeah, so we launched honestly, the why not now was really just like kind of getting, just constantly, I think being angry and frustrated every day of like, if they just listen to me, or, reading headlines about the, need for more sustainable daily choices and all of that. That just made me really excited to start what is now August. So yeah, it was a steep learning curve. We ended up raising our pre-seed round I closed it up in 2021 and then launched, and here we are a year later. We make sustainable tampons and pads. So we're really known for our pads because while most pads take 5 to 8 centuries to decompose, August pads are fully biodegradable within 12 months. They're plastic free. So they're not only like less crinkly, but they're also more absorbent and more sustainable. We're super gender inclusive from everything that we do, offsetting all of our carbon, things like that.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing and giving that context. I love what you said about, you're angry, you're frustrated, and you witnessed this problem. You knew that you could offer a solution, but how for those that are listening and they're like, I want to start something, but I don't know what. Sometimes diving into what frustrates you the most is the best source of identifying what you're passionate about that you can then convert over into drive and motivation and just desire to green light and get something done. So it's it can be really good fuel in the beginning. It's like lighter fluid. You don't necessarily want to sustain off of anger. Maybe some people do, I'm sure. But it's cool to witness where you are in your entrepreneurial journey and knowing where it started. I remember saying something to you at that dinner. I think it was like, we're talking about the progress of August, and I'm like, do you think you'd go public? Do you think you'd sell to a strategic down the road? And like, P&G or whatever, some sort of CPG, big conglomerate. And you're like, it was almost like a non-factor, like, oh, hell no, I'm not going to go there. I'm trying to get away from those folks. And I was just like, yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, heaven forbid, something could change, the world could shift, and all of a sudden there'd be a lot more sustainability in those big epicenters, but that's not why you started it. So it's like, duh. Yeah. But most people just think, oh, well, if this, then that, or this is the route. And I just love the renegade thinking that you have.
Yeah, exactly as you said. Like, I think that for me, like, my goal was and is, to create a more ethical, empowering, inclusive supply chain and product that I think really is values aligned with like the change that I want to see in the world. I get asked a lot, like, oh, do you still identify as an activist? And I think that for me, like, I just define activism as pushing against the status quo. And I think that you can do that from so many different ways of being, whether it be through art, through culture, through entrepreneurship. And I think that honestly, a lot of what I studied in school was like around being critical of living in a really consumerist country. And I don't really think that that's going anywhere. It's so ingrained into like the bedrock of what this country was founded upon. But I think that one way that I do think you can make change in this world is to create modes in which you're serving needs of consumers in a way that's also creating change at a much larger level. And I think that right now, I don't really see a lot of other partners, especially in this space, that are doing that in the way that I want to see and like what we're trying to create at August. But I honestly hope that more brands become that, like, I don't want August to be the only carbon neutral period brand. I think that it would be really sad if we were the only one. Like when I talk about being a carbon neutral brand, I don't mean to be like, oh, and we're the only one, that's what you should buy from us. Like for me, every time I talk about our educational initiatives, I honestly kind of mean it in the way of like inviting even competitors to start doing the same, And I think that if we get to a point where we're looking at the field and it's like, wow, I think that we could grow faster together. Like maybe I won't have an exit out of the question, but at the moment I'm just so focused and excited about August creating more opportunities of differentiation and hopefully like pushing everybody to be more sustainable.
That speaks volumes. That's something that it's not just an add-on. It was a big part of it's the genesis. Mm-hmm. So it's not this feature, right? Not a marketing feature. Yeah. Okay, couple rapid fire questions for you. When you hear the word renegade, who do you think of?
Actually, before I got on the phone with you, I looked up what renegade meant.
Depends. There's a lot of definitions out there.
Yeah, because I was like, wait, doesn't renegade mean like a rebel? That's kind of what I thought of it. That's kind of how I assumed that renegade meant. It's super interesting because like, I think that my idea of renegade was like this rebel, right? Like goes against the grain, which is kind of what I was saying with like being, activism. Like activism can come in so many different forms. And it like, to me, it's just like doing something that's different. And so, for me, I think that that's exactly why August resonates is like, we are doing things that kind of shock people. Like even saying we're a trans inclusive period brand, people are like, wait, what does that mean? And oftentimes they're like, wait, only girls get their period. Like periods and, womanhood goes hand in hand. What the fuck are they talking about? So I think that for me, anyways, I think for me, completely honest, I had to Google exactly what renegade meant just to make sure I knew exactly what it meant.
That's fair. No, totally.
But honestly, like I've been thinking a lot about State Senator Wendy Davis, just with all the news around Roe versus Wade. And, Wendy Davis was a state senator who did I think a 14-hour filibuster, on the floor of the Texas House against some anti-abortion legislation. And to me, she represented so much of working within a system that was inherently rigged against the values of what she was trying to fight for. And so that's who I think of, I think at the current moment, someone I've been thinking about a lot lately.
I love the timeliness of that. And, the potential unexpected, understated probably example I think of renegade as individuals, especially with bravery and also inclusivity. So it's not always like, I'm just going to go toward this on my own. But so that's a great example. And okay, so next question, what keeps you up at night? I love that that you're sleeping a lot more than 2 hours, and you prioritize sleep. But what keeps you up at night, if anything?
Honestly, the news headlines have been like I think lately, like I think I've always been really fascinated by politics and current events. I think so much of my motivation to do the work that I'm doing now is that it's like my form of resistance against a lot of the discrimination and like unfortunate events we still see today. I think that for me, like I've always been a really avid feminist. And I think that like it's one of the reasons why I am so passionate about the work that we do. But yeah, I mean, honestly, a lot of it is the news headlines today. Like, I think that it's really hard to be someone like, honestly, like someone of progressive values who like reads the news and are reading about gun violence in this country and, everything happening with climate change and reproductive rights. And honestly, that's been keeping me up a lot at night, just trying to maintain like a sense of hope. Like, okay, I'm really excited to wake up tomorrow and get back to work, And so I think that that's what's been keeping me up at night. I think a more, hopeful way of saying that is like, I'm really kept up by like, honestly, like eagerness of like, wow, we really have a responsibility to act. And I guess it is asking that question of like, why not now? And if we don't act now, like, what are the consequences?
Wow. Yes. I hear you. And it's cool to see how much action you've been taking for quite some time, right? This isn't a new thing or fad with you especially. Okay, so I actually would be remiss if I didn't ask this because it was on my mind as one of the things that just had me in stitches when we were at dinner. And that was this story, if you could even time box it and sum it up, but you talked about this TikTok video that you ended up doing. But it was as a result of something that had happened in your personal life that was not necessarily funny, but the TikTok video was hilarious. It has to do with your family. Would you be willing to share that?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think about 8 months ago, me and my sisters reconnected with my grandparents for the first time in many, many years. And it went well the first time, and then we visited them again, and it really did not go well. But all that to say that, yeah, we were disowned by my grandparents. And basically, it was because we were quote unquote not Chinese enough. And I think a lot of it honestly was related to the work that we do, like, very outspoken as pro-abortion feminists. They're a lot more conservative, and, I'm very open on social media about everything from my trauma, my family trauma, to, my sexuality, to my period blood. And so we got disowned. And because we were like, basically all three of us are, now TikTokers, because we were all together making content, we had been making content about being so excited that we were reconnected with our grandparents. And then when we got disowned, that content then became processing how we were disowned, like on social media. And, I think all of us growing, we've all grown up with social media. I've had a social media account since I was like 9. I don't think that we've ever felt like shy to share on social media. But yeah, they ended up going really viral because we connected with all these other, honestly, like young Asian Americans, especially like young Asian American creatives who were all like, LOL, girl, me too. Also just got disowned yesterday. Like, we just kind of got introduced to this community of people, especially like in the AAPI community, who had also gotten disowned. And so it's something that I kind of talk about now. And I think like now it's kind of something we joke about, like being so unapologetic and open and passionate and, being a renegade to the point that you're disowned by the older generation because they just don't get you.
What I love about this, Nadya, is like you have this platform that TikTok is usually known as a certain, there's a certain connotation or expectation of what TikTok is. And here you have, in a way, you're using it as a vehicle for processing and a venue for connecting. And it's super cool that, it's just communication. You can do anything with it, right? It doesn't matter. It's just like Twitter. It's called something that sounds so silly, so people just think it's silly. No, all this is just communication. And so I appreciate that you're using it in these different ways to give people more of an open mind of how they may embrace it or not and consume it or not. So yeah, thank you for sharing. Yeah.
Of course. And I mean, I think like even now when I'm, consulting with clients often like on TikTok and marketing strategy, like there's this kind of fear, especially from people who are older, who are like, oh, but I'm too old for TikTok, or like TikTok's not for me. Like nobody wants to see me dancing. And I'm like, okay, but it's not just a dancing app. Like this is basically a high viral social media app. And honestly, like some of the people, the clients and brands that I've worked with, the ones that do really well are just the ones who are like down to make a lot of content, right? And like, it's not an age thing. It's kind of just how open are you to really getting out there and like putting out a lot of content, right? Like, it's just, it's more of, I think, of a willingness and excitement to be involved than, an age thing.
It's so true. It's so true. Okay. So you're 16, you haven't started your nonprofit yet, but you're about to. You have no idea what this road is going to unfold to. And if you were to go say something to yourself in that moment, right before, what would you say right now?
I think that I would honestly just tell my 16-year-old self to like never forget why I'm doing the things that I'm doing, or like to stay really rooted in that. Because I think that, as a young activist organizer coming at it from a really early age, there was a lot of media and a lot of glamour and a lot of hate and a lot of exhaustion. Like there were so many different emotions going into it. And some of them were very positive and some of them were very negative. And I think that what I wish I could always warn my younger self about is like always remembering like why I'm doing this. And I think that that's honestly what keeps me going, even in like dark times today, is like always coming back to like talking to honestly like young menstruators who are using August product or who are following us on social, who need that reminder that like they should have every right to be confident in their body and everything. And I think that that's something that I definitely had to like heal through later in my career, and I think caused a lot of hurt along the way. And that's something that I think every young person needs a reminder of.
So good. What a way to wrap up. I think just not even young person. I need to hear that.
Yeah.
I know, I bet my parents would want to hear that. There's a lot of relevant wisdom in everything you're doing. And so thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being an open book, because one of the things I always say is seeing is believing. People don't even necessarily have an open mind enough, or maybe haven't raised the man-made ceilings high enough to realize what's possible. And so it's a lot for people to just witness and be exposed.
Absolutely.
To. So thank you so much for your time and your wisdom.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the show. Hit me up on social media to let me know what you think. I'm at Amy Jo Martin on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And I want to hear your why not now moments so I can share them on the show. Just send me a note to whynotnow@amyjomartin.com. For show notes and other offers, you can visit amyjomartin.com/whynotnow. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up for my email newsletter for exclusive content and announcements. A big thanks to Rock Salt Music for all of the tunes by the talented John Coggins. And of course, a hat tip to Richard Brewer for editing and producing the show. I'll see you next time. And until then, why not now?